Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone doing? And welcome to Two Black Church Boys Churched and Changed. My name is Calvin Miller III, and I am here with my co-host, William Lee. How are you doing, William?
Not well, but we'll talk about that tonight as to the reason why I'm not well. Just at the outset, please forgive me for using this. It is very, very hot over here. I cannot turn on our air conditioner right now, so please forgive me.
You are forgiven.
Tonight's, thank you, Calvin. You're a gracious man. But tonight's talk, if you will take on a different shape than we had initially planned. When Calvin and I had thought about this podcast, we had thought about doing a variety of topics. And we had actually already planned all the way out through the end of June. And tonight we were going to introduce a different kind of format we would debate. And we were planning to debate traditional versus contemporary music. But due to what's going on in our world, in our society, we found it pertinent to shift focus a little bit. When Calvin and I began talking and thinking through this podcast, it was on the heels of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor's murders, for lack of better words. And today we find ourselves in similar and perhaps even more perilous times, right? We are looking on the heels of George Floyd, Desmond Franklin, Christian Cooper, and a whole series of Black men and Black women who have been killed unjustly, in my opinion, at the hands of white malefactors or police officers. And so tonight, in my tiredness and my disgust and my sickness and my disdain for all that has transpired, I felt it pertinent that we shift from what we were initially going to talk about and to just have a discussion with you all about the variety of things that are going on and how we feel about it as two Black young men. And we're going to start talking first and foremost about what's going on in Minnesota with George Floyd. If you have not heard the story, the basic background is that George Floyd was allegedly suspected of using a fake $100 bill in a store. And so the cops were called. He was outside in his car. There allegedly was some kind of confrontation between George Floyd and the police officers. And that ended up with him being placed on the ground and one officer placing his knee on George Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes. And in the video, you can hear him pleading for his life, saying that he cannot breathe, calling for his mother, who's, as I don't know, more background, he had just moved to Minnesota to go to trucking school and to try to turn his life around. And his mother was all the way in Texas, where he's from. And so he was calling for his mother. And then shortly after that, he lost consciousness and he was pronounced dead minutes later. What's going on in Minneapolis right now is that there's been a crowd of people that have formed, people call it a mob, but I take issue with that language, who have come outside of his house. Food delivery has refused to deliver food to his family. And a series of demonstrations have happened in Minnesota. Some may call them riots, but I, again, take issue with that language. So I will call them demonstrations. And businesses have been looted, notably Target in that community. But yet, there have been no arrests made. People have been silent on what I feel is another unjust killing of an unarmed Black man. And we're just sitting here in suspended animation as we relive another brother unjustly killed, in my opinion, at the hands of the police. It brings back to Eric Gardner all over again. Calvin, we haven't even discussed this in depth, So I just want to know, you know, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Right. I think it was Fannie Lou Hamer who said, like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. But I think now it's even bigger for the Black community that we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And as two Black young men on this platform, we want to take advantage of it so much to really explain how now is more time than ever in the middle of this pandemic that we are dealing with these issues during a new Jim Crow, an era where literally we are being seen as threats. And I don't know how we can wear it anymore that we are not threats. When you bring it up, and I saw in the news, and I was on Instagram and just seeing how people were like sharing it out there. Every single follower that I have was posting it on their stories. And it should not take people on social media to use their voices and their activism for something to be done. Ahmaud Arbery, when you talk about that, that happened months ago. Then finally a video comes out, and then Instagram and Black Twitter take onto social media and finally say, we can't deal with this anymore, do something, call this number, sign this petition. And then finally those men were arrested. And in the same case, even the mayor spoke out and said something needs to be done. The president said, oh, we're gonna investigate it a little bit more. I don't know what else you have to investigate. That man was killed with his knee, with that police officer's knee. He was killed. And if you watch the video, you hear this Black man like saying, get off of him, like he can't breathe. And he's explaining this chokehold. Basically, he knows, because he did like Taekwondo or something like that, that exactly he was cutting off his blood circulation. He was cutting off his will to breathe. He was taking that away from him. And he explained that while doing what he did. And that it is sick, and like I said, we are sick and tired of being sick and tired that we have to go outside and be scared for our lives. That is not what this country should be struggling with. But history is repeating itself, and I don't even know what to do. Like, what do we do? How do we use our voices anymore? Because I feel like I'm not doing enough.
I mean,
what do we do?
Listen, we're starting by just conversing about it, by using this platform to discuss this, right? That's a start. But similar to you, right. I do feel helpless. I do feel powerless, man. When I was in law school, we've talked about this in private. I literally came into law school during the whole Ferguson uprising, and when the no indictment came down from that, we were out protesting and marching in the streets and conversing and talking and arguing and petitioning, but nothing was being done. Nothing was changing. And so I grew frustrated with the marching. I grew frustrated with the constant calls for justice and the constant back and forth, and what we were doing not seeming to work. But what I've recognized now is that I don't know if it's our role anymore, man, for us to change the consciousness of this country. I'm tired of trying to argue and plead my humanity. I wrote about this on Facebook earlier. I'm sick and tired of arguing about why, as a Black man, my life should matter. I'm sick and tired of arguing with other people about why these issues are so important to me, about why I feel scared. I went to work out today for the first time. I just went for a walk. I went to Family Dollar, but I decided I wanted to do a light jog with my backpack while I was walking. And I legitimately felt fearful because I have this mask on. You can't see my face. I'm wearing all black. I'm wearing a black shirt, black joggers, black sneakers. I don't know who's going to, misidentify me or think that I'm up to ill intent. And I'm tired of explaining that fear to other people. So what I believe is my role now in this fight is to create a space for Black people to come together to voice our frustration, to voice our pain, but for it to also be cathartic, for it to also be healing, for it also for us to be a place of safety and refuge that we can talk about these issues together. And then perhaps from there, collaborating with minds like you, collaborating with minds like the guests that we will have in weeks to come on the various topics that we'll have, that we'll talk about, that interface, that interchange with all of these things. Perhaps from there we can springboard into solutions, man. But I'll be completely transparent with you. I'm tired out of trying to figure out solutions at this point. I'm tired of all of that. I'm just trying to live. We're in the midst of a pandemic, and America cannot take a break from killing Black men in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic, the likes of which this world has never seen.
Right. And from my perspective, this is now more time than ever for our white counterparts to step in and use their privilege to speak out on these issues. When you have privilege in this society, when systematic racism is already pushing us back as Black men, Black people, it is time for our white counterparts to be co-conspirators and stand up for what they believe in. If they see that it doesn't, because I enjoy when people are posting things on social media and everything like that. But if you are on the lines with us, if you are standing up with us, if you are constantly speaking out about it, making the call, signing the petition, saying that this is enough, this should not happen because they are Americans like we are, then that is where changes will come. But we can say but so much before anything happens. It takes those that have that privilege within the society that are making strides and inches to really help us get to that same platform. Because right now, equity is not the focus of America. And that is something that we see that we're not getting within our schools, within our cities, within urban communities, within our churches. This is continuously a problem. And it's time for people in leadership who have power to really stand up and say, this is enough. This should not be happening.
I agree, but I think that part of the problem is that people don't feel as though they're interconnected with us. Like, they don't feel as though the struggle is proximate enough to them for them to really feel a sense of urgency to act on our behalf. Martin Luther King Jr. said it best, that we're all caught in this web of instrumentality, right? Where one thing that happens to Black America affects all of America. But we've always been the scapegoats. We've always been the sacrificial lambs for this country. From the beginning of time, from slavery through Jim Crow, through now, we've always been the sacrificial lambs in this country for the sake of community, for the sake of building this place up. And to be transparent about this, we are a Black church within a white space. We're a church that was in a denomination that was founded on abolition. John Wesley was a father of abolition. And I appreciate what the United Methodist Church has historically been in terms of civil rights and in terms of fighting for that struggle. But I'm a little perplexed about where we are now. And I implore our church to use the voice that it traditionally used to speak out against these issues, because we know that our history says that we've been on the right side of justice, right? That's why we merged in 1968 with the Methodist body, because of the body's history towards our community. But I'm just imploring us to, as United Methodists in particular, since that's the denomination that we're a part of, to also use their voice to speak out against this, because this is a shame. I don't care, and we can talk about the Desmond Franklin piece in a second. I don't care what George Floyd did. I don't care if he killed 15 people. If that man was restrained, if that man was contained, if that man was motionless and not bothering anybody, there is no reason why that man should have had his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes. There is no conscionable reason that you can explain to me that would justify him doing that. And that man should be I'm trying my best because this is a church platform.
Yes, composure.
Use, as my aunt would call, my $200,000 education. So I'm trying my best to use the right words,
right,
and not the words that instantaneously come to my mind. But there is no way that he should still be a free man. I don't care what he's done. And the same thing with Desmond Franklin. I don't care how many warrants you've had, how many, and that's just all ploy as an aside. That's all a ploy to mischaracterize Black men as evil and as vicious and as predators. It doesn't matter what crimes we've done. We still deserve to be treated with humanity. We still deserve our day in court. We still deserve the rights and privileges that come with being a citizen of this country. And for you to assume the role of judge, jury, and executioner over this man's life by putting your knee on his neck for 8 minutes, by shooting Desmond Franklin, by running rounds into this man's car, is unconscionable for me. It's just unconscionable. And I'll let you talk because
I totally agree with you. When you even talk about and knowing you that you went to Morehouse and then Penn, that doesn't even mean anything. So even bringing up Christian Cooper, he's in the park and bird watching, and he's following the rules and saying to this lady, your dog needs to be on a leash. That is what the sign says. He's not making this up. This is the rules, and that she must abide by them. But instead, she resorts to saying that he is threatening her life because he brought up the rules that was set for by New York City in that park, and
Calvin, you look like you were frozen there, sir. So I've heard what you were saying before you froze, but I'm hoping that we can get you unfrozen there. But let me just kind of piggyback off of that and just say that I was particularly disgusted by the Central Park incident, if you all don't know what Calvin was referring to, because not only did she call the police, but she insinuated that he was threatening her life. And knowing what the response is to Black men when the police come, she literally put this man at risk for his life. Calvin is gone, y'all. And so I'm hoping that we can get him back. But in the interim, it's just me and y'all for a second. So I invite you all to not just make this a one-way conversation between me and you all, but to submit your comments and your concerns. Let's see if we can get Calvin back. Calvin told me to continue. We're going to try to get him back. But it's just tough right now to be Black in America. Malcolm X had this amazing quote that if you stick a knife in a man's back 9 inches, it's not progress to pull that knife out 3 inches. It's progress when you pull that knife out, when you attend to that wound, and you do all that's in your power to ensure that that man is healed. That's the problem in America today. We have, for over 400 years, had a knife in the back of Black people in this country. And little things like electing a Black president, we're yanking the knife out a little bit. Civil Rights Act of 1965, we're yanking the knife out a little bit. The Voting Rights Act, we're yanking the knife out a little bit. But we have not done the real hard work of healing the wounds of white supremacy, of racism, of classism, of gender inequity, of a whole host of issues in this country. We have not addressed America's original sin of racism, which it was founded on. capitalism in this country cannot even exist independent of the racist structure in which this country was built on. And so we want to talk about progress. We want to talk about criticizing people for rioting or for looting or for quote unquote tearing up their own communities. But we have to look at the root causes for the reasons why people are responding the way they are responding. America, we are in trauma. We are experiencing trauma. As Black men, our experiences in this country have literally been traumatic. For me as a Black man to feel threatened for my own safety by leaving my own door in my own community, which is majority Black, for me to still feel afraid when I see a white person on the street that they're going to see me as a threat because I have this mask on and because they can't see my face. For me as a Black man to feel uncomfortable jogging at Cooper River Park or to feel uncomfortable jogging through my own neighborhood. For me as a Black man to not want to wear a hoodie because I'm afraid of what somebody will say or what somebody will do because of their perception of me as a large-framed Black man who is dark-skinned. It's draining. And this is a church platform, and so we're people of faith. We look to faith when things like this are transpiring. But in total honesty, it's still yet draining. It's still yet tiring. It's still yet frustrating that we're still going through these things in 2020, supposedly an era of post-racialism, whatever that means. It's just tough. It's just tiring. It's just exhausting. And my hope for tonight, with sharing my thoughts at this point, and sharing with Calvin's thoughts, was not necessarily to provide a space where we're trying to come up with solutions, like we said earlier, but to voice our frustration, to give sound to the pain that people are experiencing. I know in some areas I'm inarticulate at best at talking about these things. I know that in some areas I fall short and I don't always have the right words to fully describe my thoughts, to fully describe the traumatic experiences that our people are forced to endure. But I'm just hoping that by lifting my voice and by talking about this, that we can begin conversations about these issues. And it looks like Reverend Dickens is, or not Reverend Dickens, I think Calvin is trying to reconnect with us. Is that Calvin? I hope that's Calvin, because I have talked long enough. All right, Calvin, welcome back, sir. Welcome back. With 6 minutes to spare, welcome back.
My
Hopefully
apologies.
we'll be able to bring your face on soon enough.
My apologies.
There he is.
We cannot control things sometimes, and my power went out. But I thank William for continuing the progress. Things can unexpectedly happen, as you might have seen last week as well. So I'm glad to be back on. And I was hearing what William was saying. But like I was adding, it's just ridiculous that you can't even use your education as a Black person to get from one place to the next. It's always a stepping stone or something in front of you that kind of puts us against the walls, that we can't even use our degrees, our education, the articulation of our words to really say something with power and meaning without getting through the door. No matter what, we are still seen as a threat because of this, but not because of what's in here, or not because of what we say, or not because what creative juices we can present to the world, or anything like that. This is just, it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And I am just sad. Yep. I'm just sad that this has happened. And I guess the last
in the last
okay.
5 minutes. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Calvin, and especially since I have been talking for so long. But I received a question, and I did want to kind of give us voice for the question.
Yeah.
We recognize that we're supposed to end at 8:00, but because Calvin is cut off, we may go slightly over. Yeah. I promise that we'll be done before 8:10. So thank you all for bearing with us and for staying with us. I just want to address the one question that was asked in my comments. We were asked to talk to what the church's response is and what the church's response should be. And given that this is that kind of a platform, I figure we can spend a few minutes talking about that. But we also wanted to get to Joe Biden. But I'll quickly answer that question, then I'll turn it over to Calvin. The Black church, the response is first and foremost to be a part of the voices that are putting pressure on our elected officials to do what they're supposed to do. If you have a prosecutor that is supposed to charge these 4 officers, it's not enough just to fire them. You have to charge them. And as people of faith, we stand on the word of God, that God is not only a God of love, but God is a God of truth. God is a God of justice. God is a God of what is right. And as a Black church, we have to be on the side of what is right. And what is right is that 4 murderers who killed an unarmed man, no matter what his crime was, who killed him, should not be on the streets, should not be permitted to roam the streets. So the Black church needs to get bold about declaring that God demands that we do justice. The Bible says, what is required of you, O mortal man, but to love mercy, to do justice, and to walk humbly with your God. That's what Micah 6:8 says. So the church needs to demand that this country do what the word says and do justly. What do you think, Al?
No, I most definitely agree with that. And I think this goes back to the conversation that we had with the pastor about how can the church be more involved in the community and not just be a place where people can come and receive services and different things like that. And it's most definitely that when we're reaching out to people outside, what is our method, what is our purpose, and what are we telling them? We're praying over their lives, but continuously, how are we fixing these issues? Are we aligning ourselves and bringing activists into the community to have dialogues and panels and have conversation? Because I could see the church, for example, the Black church especially, having a panel discussion where we're inviting activists in the city of Camden, for example, and bringing them into our church and talking about this and actually having dialogue around these situations and issues. I think this is a platform and a space where they can instantly do it. But we just have to see the value that we have as a people, the value that we have as a community to really provide those services to people. Why are we providing those services? What is the issue at hand and where does this stem from? And that's truly, I think we need to bring in people, not only who are part of the church, but also who are outside of the church and actually doing effective and positive things for the community and are standing up for what they believe in. They might not be an affiliate of your church, but they can still bring value to the conversation that is not being had or that is not occurring into the Black churches right now or today.
I think those are some very good, concrete, tangible things that the church can do. I think, though, the first step is for the church to get into the biblical mandate that it's required in this moment. I think before you can do any of the things that you just laid out, Calvin, you just laid out a series of wonderful things that all churches should be doing, and that could be doing even in this moment, given that we have all of these online platforms to reach more people than ever before now. But before we do that, the church has to adopt, and I think hopefully, Lord willing, next week we'll have on Reverend Merrill to kind of talk more about this. The church has to adopt a theology, a Christology that aligns Christ and God with the suffering and the plight of God's people. And when we begin to talk about a God who's on the side of the oppressed, who's on the side of the disinherited, who's on the side of those who are let down and left out, then we'll have a church that's speaking boldly to these issues, and we'll have a church that's doing all of the things that you just laid out.
Right.
I do not want to leave without touching on this Joe Biden situation
Exactly.
because Calvin and I have had some intense fellowship, if you will, about Joe Biden. We won't get into that here because this is a church platform and we do not want to lose the church's 501c3 status over our ruminations. However, we both agree, and if you're not aware, that Joe Biden's recent commentary about Blackness vis-a-vis voting for him was inappropriate for him as a white man to say. I think I can say that, Calvin, without us. I can say that right without us.
You can say that. You can say that.
I can say that. I can say that.
Yes.
So just so that y'all are aware, Calvin went on the Breakfast Club and was interviewed by Charlamagne the God. Amazing commentary, amazing work, by the way, that Charlamagne the God is doing right now. I know this is a church platform, but I wholeheartedly recommend the Breakfast Club and the work that he's doing. I don't agree with everything that he does, but I think that he's been doing some awesome political work lately. And at the end of the interview, Joe Biden claimed that if you do not vote for him, you are not black. In fact, he said, you ain't black. And political issues aside, I think that it is problematic for someone who is not black to ascribe what is and what is not black on people of color or black people in particular for choosing to vote for you, to vote for Donald Trump, to vote third party, or to not vote at all. I think that is deeply problematic.
No, I agree with that. For too long, our voice has been manipulated and taken advantage of. I love President Obama, but really, what legislation, what was really done for the Black community when you think about it? And I love Michelle and that administration. And then you say the same thing. I feel like sometimes we don't separate the candidates from each other. When we think of Obama, we think of Biden, but we also have to think of if Biden is in that presidential spot and that space, truly, what is he going to do for us? And right now, I know that when we're talking about, for example, reparations, everyone wants to make a committee about reparations. But why can't we talk about feasible solutions for reparations? I'm done talking about it. We know what reparations are. We know everything about the acres and the mule and the land and everything like that. But why are we doing anything about it? And we wouldn't be asking for reparations if things weren't done in our communities. If money wasn't being invested in our schools, our HBCUs. I think Jamila Hill actually brought this up a while ago, saying, what if the NFL players that are now, or the college players that are in D1 schools, big universities, what if they left because there's a big issue right now with being paid. California was the first state to even do that, to pay athletes. What if those students left and went to HBCUs? Then talk about the revenue that would be going into their schools. You have mega stars that would have went to HBCUs. Why can we have big stars coming from HBCUs and going to the NBA, the MLB, the NFL? Why isn't that something that is happening? And truly, that is what I'm talking about. When you talk about solutions and ideas and things that can impact our community, we don't see it. And so I don't think that it was the right saying by Biden himself. He really couldn't do it. He shouldn't have said anything. It was fine. The interview was fine until he said that. But Charlamagne said afterwards, he said, I'm not really worried about that. I'm not worried about who votes who or President Trump or anything like that. I'm worried about what you specifically are going to do for our community. And instead of being very broad, I even saw on Biden's Instagram about what he's going to do for the Black community. Instead of being very broad, he should be very minute and specific and straight to the point. What are you going to do? Because once you say to the Black community, oh, I'm going to get you or make this type of legislation or do this X, Y, and Z, then that is when we truly feel like our vote is being appreciated. And that's when we want to come out to the polls and invest ourselves. And especially thank you to Black women who have really devoted their time and their space to helping push politics and for the Democratic Party especially. Some of those tight races, especially down south, would not have been won if it wasn't for Black women. And that is the vote that has especially stood out and really invested themselves, even though they are the ones that have really been marginalized. When you talk about being a Black woman, a woman and a Black woman at the same time. Though that is something that no one really calls out for, no one really thanks them for, because they are especially the ones that have devoted themselves for Biden to even be in the position that he is in today.
I wholeheartedly agree. You said that and you articulated that very well. The Democratic Party owes its existence to Black women.
Yes.
If it were not for Black women, Doug Jones would have lost in Alabama.
Yes.
The 2018 midterm elections would not have gone the way that it went. And the gap between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump would have been even greater.
Right.
The Democratic Party, in my opinion, and we can say this without losing our 501c3 status, by the way, just so in case people are worried, we can have this level of conversation without losing the status. We just can't endorse a particular candidate.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party has traditionally and universally, in my opinion, given the Black community its behind to kiss. They come around for election day, they seek our vote, they make a bunch of platitudes and promises, and most of the time what they do is they make a bunch of cultural markers about putting hot sauce in bags and swag surfing and doing the Dougie and all of these other things. But what we want to see at this point, we don't need to see you hit them folk. We don't need to see you whoa. We don't need to see any of that. What we need to see is what tangible policy proposals do you have that are going to improve the quality of life for Black people in this country? What things are you going to implement and put in place so that what happened with George Floyd won't continue to happen in 2030, 2040, 2050?
Exactly.
I don't care about you going to meet with Al Sharpton to eat soul food at Sylvia's in New York. I don't care. What I need you to do is I need you to come up with a plan that is going to tangibly impact the lives of Black people. And I'll push it even further. I need Black people to not so blindly vote a particular party and give away its leverage and its platform because of the fact that this party understands that we are typically going to vote a traditional way. I'm not going to say any more than that, because if I do say any more than that, then I'll become in danger of losing the 501c3 status. But I'm going to implore that we be more strategic with our vote than I feel as though we currently are.
And William, even more than that, we need to be careful when we just welcome them into our churches and then allow them to be like, yes, I'm going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And thank you for inviting me and shaking hands, because for the most part, we can't use that as a media thing. That is something where they're trying to capture and say that they're getting involved. And historically, that has always happened. I don't even need even the Black candidates. That's another thing. When you talk about the primaries, when you talk about the debates, quickly you saw that a lot of Black or people of color who were politicians were taken out of the race. You saw Kamala Harris, you saw Booker leave, you saw Castro leave, and these were voices that Black voters, some of them liked, some of them didn't. For example, you take Elizabeth Warren even and talk about the way in which she tried to provide legislation and ideas. And I think that is something that we need in our politicians. We can't just be voting based on party, but we have to truly understand that our candidate is going to fight for us as a community, because you are putting a lot in their hands. You're putting your life, your vote in their hands, and a vote should be precious.
Definitely a vote should be precious. Definitely we ought to be concerned for a party that portrays itself to be the voice for Black and brown people that will not elect Black and brown people or will not allow them to primary. But there are a lot of factors that go into that. We can talk about that at a later time. I think we can talk about that. I want to structure that conversation in a way that we don't lose our 501c3 status. I'm very concerned about that, Calvin, because I can go left real quick, as you know. I can go left because me and you have diverse opinions about this.
I know.
Because we've talked offline about this. But I think that part of the problem is the way that the primary season is ran. I think that if you want to truly have a primary that is reflective of your party, then perhaps we ought to think about not having Iowa and New Hampshire be the first two states that are that get to choose the Democratic nominee or the nominee in general for president.
And then South Carolina, and then all these other historically Black communities.
I personally have thoughts that we need to just have a national primary day and end all of the state by state primary contests in and of itself. I think that would be more equitable to Black and brown candidates who traditionally aren't able to get the same amount of funding that their white counterparts can get. We noticed that even on the grassroots level, it's very difficult for Black and brown candidates to fundraise. Kamala did very well initially, but even she found it difficult to sustain, funding. But it is 8/12, and we made a commitment to the people.
Yes.
And I want to honor that commitment to the people. We thank you all again for tuning in with us, for bearing through the technology. As Calvin said at the outset of this show, we as Black people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. That Fannie Lou Hamer quote, I think, perfectly encapsulates the mood that Calvin and I have about what's going on in our country. We pray that you engage with this video as it stays up. We pray that you send us your comments, that you continue to wrestle through these issues on your own, and that we foster conversation. In the weeks ahead, we're going to be featuring people who are working on the ground, not only to give voice to the pain of what's going on and multitudes of different facets of Black life, but who are also working on innovative solutions to these things. And so please stay tuned with us in the weeks ahead as we welcome some very powerful and influential voices into our conversation, into our dialogue about what it means to be Black and young in this country and churched. So until next time, we are two Black church boys reminding you to stay church.
Stay church. Peace.
All right. Peace.